Welcome students. Let's begin our lecture on line, one of the most basic elements in art and design. Now, what is an actual line? Well, I want us to think about how this can be a seemingly simple thing. In geometry, we think of it as two points connecting, but we can also think of that point in motion in what turns into a line, or a connection between adjacent points, or even not an actual line, but an implied connection between those points. And this, of course, can add special energy to any design or art piece. Actual lines, so lines that are actually there, can describe complex forms, even become shapes, and they can make these forms simply and eloquently. Now, contour lines, which is just a fancy word for outline, of course defines the edges of these forms and suggests three-dimensionality. In the drawing here that you see from Rembrandt, you're going to be noticing that this is a faster paced type of drawing called gesture drawing. It uses simple lines and captures the essential action rather than focusing on all the tiny little details. So it gives us the gist, or, the quick notation of what our subject is doing. Plus provides a really nice line characteristic of fast quality. Implied lines. So these are lines that don't actually exist. They're suggested. So you can see in the column on the left, those are actual lines, and the column on the right are examples of implied lines. Your viewer is going to read them as if they are connected, though, and is a great way to imply motion or some kind of closure that, they're connected to through proximity, or how close or far away these points are. Or even as you see with the numbers, how they relate, or with the telephone poles, the scale shift as well, the projection of that motion. Types of lines. Well, just like we learned in our elementary school, we have all different types of lines. They can be curved, straight, diagonal, zigzag, and back to implied lines, dashed or dotted. This, of course, brings us to the point of motion, pun intended there. This is where you can imply direction or have your viewer look at certain areas of your composition. Now, whether they become geometric, which means more 90-degree angled, sharp edge and size, they have implied names such as squares, circles, triangles, versus organic on the right, which is going to be more freeform and not having an actual name that you would find in a geometry textbook. Notice that the white in the space between the black lines also is a line. So this is kind of a play that we'll work with later in our spatial project with the Notan. Line quality. So you'll see in this Giacometti piece on the side, I want you to think about the directions that the lines go, the continuity or the flow of the lines. Of course, the orientation, whether it's horizontal, going side to side, vertical, going up and down, or diagonal, going across, kind of in you could say a disco formation. And of course, this will lead to the direction or the movement of this line. Line weight can also make these more focused on where we're supposed to look. Line weight is when you have a thick or a thin line, literally the weight of the line. Linear networks. So I want you to think about this as a constellation type of thing, where multiple lines can add not only the detail, but start to provide the illusion of volumetric space. So hatching, or having lots of lines going either in parallel or perpendicular, meaning crossing over a 90-degree area, that they can create lights and darks as well as provide the illusion of volumetric form. And speaking of illusions, linear perspective is when lines also create depth, or the appearance or the illusion of space, specifically architectural or atmospheric space here. just by using lines. Now, let's head into lines in art specifically. Lines can be, of course, descriptive. They help us understand what we're seeing. So outlines defining shapes and, of course, boundaries. And single lines and hatching give us what we would call value or lights and darks. So understanding how light would fall over those forms. Implied lines are, of course, giving us the suggestion of an edge rather than clearly defining one. I would also say that it can be negative space in between figures, or if a figure is pointing, that can also provide those implied lines of where the viewer is supposed to look. And then, of course, my favorite, expressive lines. So these are the lines where you have them moving fast or slow in appearance, either thicker or thinner, ones that are more wiggly. They create an actual mood or tone within the work. Let's look at some examples throughout art history of line use. Jackson Pollock. Now you're probably thinking, well, these are just splatters and drips. Well, I would actually like you to think about it as a giant network, maybe kind of like a way of describing the World Wide Web or networking. A bunch of lines and points that are connected in order to form a bigger composition. Now, it might not be representative of anything that you could think as a tangible object, but it does create form and space, just as lines themselves, which is what abstract art is trying to do. It's trying to just make you look and feel using the basic art elements that we will be learning in this class. Vincent van Gogh, if we break down the actual implied jagged dotted lines of the movement of the wind, you can see in this famous work, The Starry Night, that he's implying the motion of the wind and the clouds and even the light rays that are radiating from the moon and the stars on a very dark blue night. Moving into contemporary times, we have a piece by John Baldessari where he threw 3 balls up in the air and had a friend photograph them up in the air, and he tried to create straight lines with using 3 of these sports basketballs. I love the way that the palm trees are in there too. Very California. And yes, he was a resident of Venice Beach here in California. Here's Ellsworth Kelly. He did contour line drawings and lithographs, which is a printmaking form of art. And he, of course, is working with organic line. The line weight doesn't really vary, but definitely the characteristic is describing each individual plant and every little curve that he is using through observation. 2 more examples of his plant drawings. They're just very gorgeous and straightforward. All you need is a little bit of line. Don Bachardy goes in and out of contour line, again meaning the outline, in depicting famous Hollywood stars. Here we have Bette Davis on the right and Jack Nicholson, of course a young one from 1982. Oh, it's such a great piece. And how the background and the foreground fade. We still see the continuation of the shirt and our heads, even though the line is not on the page, it's implied. Here we have artist Julie Mithru, and she is a master of gesture. These are giant wall-sized drawings. They're non-representational, so they're still in the abstract realm, but they do kind of refer to landscapes and cityscapes. Some are based off of historical maps or events, such as civil wars. And the marks on there can display every type of emotion, from confusion to aggression to bewilderment. Here's a close-up. You can feel the line quality of implied line and actual line and the gesture, and you can really feel the action or the presence of the actual artist. You can feel Julie in the actual paper making the mark. You feel like you're there with her when you see these in person. Here we have a Robert Rauschenberg. I know it's a print, but I really think that I want it to be almost a drawing project, because he drove the car over the paper, multiple pieces here, as you can see up there. And this was done in 1953. You can go see this at the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art. I know it's a print, but again, I think of it more as a linear drawing. And you can see the direction of the tire. It's quite comical. And of course, how could we not think of driving a car over to make an art piece, right? Especially in California. Here's Kurt Lemieux, a local Los Angeles artist who uses things like masking tape, pipe cleaners, pencils, paper, and forms three-dimensional lines from these everyday materials. Here's one of a bird and one of a little monkey. They're comical, they relate to art history, they deal with line weight, and of course contour line. Here's artist Lynn Myers. You're going to see more of her video for our Artist of the Week, and she does continuous line drawings, usually with paint markers, or in this case a Sharpie, and she deals with proximity, or how close lines are together, and the meditative quality of following one line after the other. She does large installations, usually wall drawings. Here's another example. And it all begins with one line that she then closely follows, so the work kind of makes itself. And this is what our first assignment in our module is based on. So I can't wait to see what you make with this. Here are more wall drawings, but they're made with masking tape. This is Hee-Seop Yoon, a contemporary still living and breathing artist who uses masking tape as a drawing medium. So I want to make sure that we are thinking outside the box, that you don't need to use conventional pens or even paper. You can just draw directly on the wall with whatever you have that will make a line. And in this case, it's masking tape. There are contemporary piles of city images. Sometimes they travel on the floor. You can really understand that the architecture of the gallery space is taken over, and they're thinking about 2D versus 3D space, one that drawing always tries to allude to, which is three-dimensional space. Here's artist Linda Bessemer. Oh, I'm sorry, this is actually Mondrian. You'll see why in a second. I confused them. So Mondrian, as you know, is the yellow, blue, red, and white space. It makes all of these grids in the De Stijl movement. Here's some early work of Mondrian, and you can see how he later gets to the grid. And here's Linda Bessemer. So now you see how they're related. Now these are diagonal lines. So they are not just straight vertical and horizontal lines that form the composition. She is still a contemporary living and breathing artist in Los Angeles. Now what's cool about these is that you see the rod at the top. That's part of the work, and what you're looking at is pure paint that is draped over a towel rack at the top. This is, again, 100% paint. So the shadow line you see there is the backside of the towel, or the towel-shaped drape thing of the paint. These are all hand painted, and yes, they are pure paint that just gets draped across, so they're not stretched on canvas. And they definitely are double-sided, so you'll see one side is painted one way, and the other side is painted in a different linear fashion, definitely based on color schemes, which we will get to in our class. And here's a close-up of the rod, so you can see how she does paint both sides of the painting. And yes, they're just held together because it's all pure acrylic paint, which is plastic. She's definitely informed by this artist, Bridget Riley, who also worked in proximity, or how lines are close together. This was a form of art making called op art, or optical illusion, and these were all done by hand, so this is not machine made. Here's another one of Bridget Riley. It might be a little hard to stare at it there. All right, so that concludes our module lecture on line. You will also need to watch the video on Lynn Myers for your artist response, and of course take our quiz online as well. I hope you enjoyed it, and I can't wait to see you in the discussion room.